Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Subtle Asian Voices. And this is your host Norman, and we have my good friends here, Uzma and George, and we can let them introduce themselves to you guys.
Hey guys, my name is Uzma. I am an assistant public defender in South Florida and born and raised in Miami. And this is my husband.
I am George. I am an immigration attorney in Miami, Florida. Also born and raised just like Uzma, and she's my wife.
That's great. So, first off, I want to know, how did you guys meet in the first place? Is this some kind of crazy?
No, it's been an argument. It's been going on for nearly 10 years, and we're going to keep it going today. So, The official story is that we were both running for student government positions in law school. I was for president. She was running for a senator position, and I chatted her up in the hallway, and that's how we initially met.
He wanted my vote.
Oh, he was lobbying for your vote?
I was. But I got to know her. We had a few run-ins following that, but nothing really, substantive. But following that semester, I get a Facebook request from a name I don't recognize.
Okay.
Wasn't using her real name on Facebook at the time.
It was phonetically spelled.
So
since I'm a unique name, I was phonetically spelling it out, just Uzma and my last initial G.
So I didn't know who it was. I looked her up real quick when I got the request and realized not only was it her, but she was also from Miami. And I responded, "Hey, you're from Miami." And then this has led to a long-standing dispute of whether she Facebook stalked me or I Facebook stalked her.
The stalker.
She's the one who sent the request. So, just because I happened to have my phone in my hand and responded to it, she takes that as, well, you were creeping on me. You immediately responded, checked my profile out.
Less than 30 seconds. But the reason why I sent the request in was that back then Facebook had friends you may know, and he popped up. And I was like, oh, he's the guy who lent me his outlines to help study for finals. In law school, that's not very common that people just give you your outlines. So I was like, oh, okay, he was nice. So I clicked it, and literally 30 seconds, not even 30 seconds later, he's like, "Are you from Miami?" And I'm like, freaking stalker, I just sent this in. And yeah.
It sounds like it's an emotional dispute here. I don't know. This is contentious here.
To our graves, this will go in terms of who did what. But
and where was this in school? Where was this?
This was in Syracuse. We went to law school together.
Yes, we went to Syracuse Law School. He started a year before I did. And we met towards the end of my first year of law school, which would have been his second year of law school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So while you're on that, what kind of blossomed that? What made you, think of her as more as a friend, and what made that happen?
What really happened was that summer, she was on a study abroad program, and I was working locally in Syracuse, and just gave us a time to chat. And a lot of it was through text or email because she was in Israel at the time. So different time zones, but we just started to get to know each other. And I guess you can say it was just sense of familiarity and comfortableness, even though I had never met her before. And that kind of, blossomed into something else.
Yeah.
And what did you see in him?
I didn't like him at first in that regard. I was like, okay, someone to talk to.
Yeah.
It really was, because
pride is going down during this call.
No, because I remember in Israel, I was there with, I think, 6 other girls or 5 other, or there were 6 total. And we were there for a study abroad program. Some of the girls would go to sleep at 9:30, 10 o'clock because they wanted to wake up at 5, 6 a.m. to do yoga or to run or whatever. So I had one of the, we all shared an apartment, and I had the sofa. And so lights were out, and I'm like, guys, this is 10 o'clock. This is too early for bed for me. But it was daytime for him, and he would be online. So I would just just talk to him.
As you can see, I was just, a means to pass time. But
Initially, yes.
It looks like it.
Initially, yes. And we started playing 21 questions. And at first it was, what's your favorite color, your favorite TV show, something like that. And then around, I think it was 7 or 8, he asked me like, what's my biggest fear? And it got into like, the questions got more serious and stuff. So by the end of the game, which we went on like for a couple of weeks,
I had her.
Yeah. My perspective of him changed, and I don't know. I always tell him like, he's like my home. There's something about him that feels safe and comforting to me. So went after that.
Great, that's good. You need some stability is always good. So Uzma, so I heard you study abroad in Israel. So what made you decide to do Israel?
So it's kind of the reason why I went to Syracuse. Syracuse has a Institute of National Security and Counterterrorism. And when I entered law school, I either wanted to be like a government agent, like an FBI agent, or I was going to practice criminal defense. And so in Israel for the summer, they had the program there with their Institute of Counterterrorism. And so it was like a 4 to 6 week program. You spend part of it in Herzliya at the institution. And then you spent, I think it was like a week or 10 days we were in Jerusalem. And so I just did that program.
Right. And did you see interesting while you were over there, or do you think that's change your whole landscape of your mindset? I don't know.
Oh, well, just getting into Israel was kind of interesting for me.
I know.
4 hours to pass their customs and borders patrol area. So my parents are Pakistani, but I'm American born, and my middle name is my dad's first name, which so happens to be some terrorist name as well. So I get flagged at airports all the time. And in Israel, those are like, I'm hitting all of their profiling, check marks, I feel like. So they pull me aside, they ask me questions, and they're asking me questions about my family in Pakistan, who I know, what my relatives I have. They want to know their names and contact information. And they ask me questions and they have me waiting area, ask me questions, have me waiting there. We did this like 4 times. And at one point in the last round, they called me in and were like, well, you're lying to us. And I'm like, I didn't lie. Like, what are you talking about? Your father's dead. And I was like, what are you talking about? My father's not dead. Like, I just saw him. And luckily, like 30 seconds later, I realized that the way I spell his name and my middle name is slightly different than his official documents. And we figured this out. And so I told them like, oh yeah, we spell it differently. And then like 5 minutes later, they were like, here you go. You're on your way.
And then I had the privilege to call her mom at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd never met her, never spoken to her. And it's like, hey, some random dude is calling at 3 a.m. Just to let you know your daughter made it through Israeli customs. Yeah. She's like, what? And I'm like, I'm just relaying this message. Uzma asked me to relay it to you. Have a good night.
Yeah. Wow. I was worried that my mom would be worried about me. And then I didn't know, like, I wouldn't be with any internet or any phone for a couple of hours until we got to our apartment and got everything set up. So I was like, it's already 4 hours delayed from what I told her I should be contacting her from the airport. And I needed help and he was online. What did I do? But the other things about Israel is that even like my professors there, they would think that they know more about my religion and where I come from just because I'm Pakistani Muslim. So that aspect of Israel was interesting, and it made me like firm up like who I am and what I stand for as far as my identity and my culture, and getting to know who that aspect of me, knowing for sure when I give answers to be confident, like this is right. This is the correct information. As far as like the people, like with cab drivers and our drivers, like with to and from our I guess school classes, what do you want to call it? You know, they just, some of them saw me as American, some of them would ask me like where I'm from and such, because I'm with like one Asian girl and like 4 or 5 white, like they look white American, and then there's me. And so we got into conversations, and some people were like, okay, like whatever, like, you know, you are who you are and it's all good. And some people would like make backhanded comments, and I was like, okay, time to shut up. Like, we're not getting to this discussion because I don't know who you are and I don't feel safe.
So like, were your parents worried about you going to Israel?
I don't know. I would assume yes. But I don't know. And it did take me 2 hours to pass, like to get out of Israel's airport and to get on a plane. So I do remember that my mom was like, because I knew I would have to be scrutinized again. And so I knew after the first experience getting in, I know she was worried about me like leaving, but that's the only thing I remember about them being worried.
Right. And George, were you worried?
I mean,
like we were just
we weren't in a relationship at that time.
Okay.
So I don't think that level of fear was present. Like now,
okay,
like, wait, what's going on? I'd probably get a little paranoid. I just found it strange. I'm like, that's, you know, the typical outsider looking in. Like that's pretty messed up. I would have breezed through it in 10 minutes, and it's taken 4 hours. And you know, the only parallel I can draw to that is I remember I was on a spring break trip during law school with a couple of friends, and we took a train from Amsterdam to Germany, and at the border, German officers came to check people's passports, and the group was mainly myself, a few friends who happened to be white, and then 2 guys. One was Pakistani, one was Indian. And the German officers like look at our passports like just as a formality, really, and give it back to us. But for those 2, they went through every single page and scrutinized single thing. And I'm like, oh, that really sucks. I guess that, you know, seeing what's customary for them as opposed to, you know, I would see it as an inconvenience just having to produce my passport, but it's more harassment for them. So that kind of came to mind, but she was all right.
So like going through that situation and witnessing all that, like did it, you know, help you understand other people's plights and maybe help you with your immigration laws?
I mean, if I was to reflect upon it now, I think it definitely factors into it. But you know, I don't want to use the word I was lucky enough. Well, I was lucky enough in the sense that I didn't really experience it growing up. Like I am, you know, Puerto Rican descent, but I was born here, raised here. I'm fair enough in skin tone that some people think I'm white. Look at my dad, though. He is obviously Puerto Rican, very dark skin. And he would tell me stories growing up about, you know, racist comments and things that happened to him. I never really had any of that happen to me, luckily, but at the same token, I wasn't completely in the dark because I've heard of these stories. So, you know, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is an eye-opening thing, but it was more, this happens more than I realize it does. And I think it definitely played a role in, you know, when I left law school, I was a prosecutor. It definitely factored how I approach cases there. And I definitely think it affects my practice now in terms of, you know, empathizing with clients and you know, reading a narrative and saying, oh, they were stopped because they were brown. That's the only real reason they were stopped. Definitely plays a role.
Right. And Uzma, it's the same thing for you, right? Like you were probably, since you were more profiled more, like how did that impact your stance on wanting to be a lawyer and stuff like that?
Well, it definitely factored into why I went to law school, because post 9/11 and things that happened to me after that is why I was looking into being like an FBI agent. But also at the same time, like I love criminal defense. So it's just the way that my life panned out. And it's now it's, you know, I'm fighting for justice. I'm a voice for my clients. That's how I see myself, making sure that their rights are not being trampled over by the state or a police officer. Most of my clients are Black. So there's racism in that, like Black people get stopped by cops way more. So it's my job to make sure that the cops are stopping them. They have valid legal reasons to stop them. So it plays into that, make sure people's rights are not being trampled over and that justice is actually being served.
That's good. I think, you know, being this current landscape, I think it's very important to do that kind of work, and it's pretty awesome. But so like now I'm curious, right? Like since you think like that, do you witness anything, you know, inside the system where there's something that's kind of shady, or maybe that's the kind of like you think that's like, I don't know, something that's weird, that's off maybe?
Ooh.
I mean, I think it's important to see, well, if I don't know, like something that's, you know, the truth, I guess, or like what's that the people need to be aware of, that in case they ever need to have a lot of representation, I guess.
I mean, it's a whole system that has issues with it. So what I see is just because somebody is more vocal, more bold in when they have police encounter, they're more likely to get handcuffed. Okay. And it might be like a simple little thing, like a traffic infraction, that just because this person is questioning the cop, like, why are you doing this and why are you doing that? I know my rights. And the officer's like, oh, I don't know, like, I'm going to use this word, and it doesn't mean that the cop is Hispanic, but like, you know, they have their like machismo come out, and they have like this power trip, yeah, you know, come out, and then a little thing blows into a big thing. I just see that a lot happening with minorities, Hispanics and African Americans in Broward County. This is where I work. I know that there's been my office in the past have pulled up cases and data about, like, you know, biking while Black in city of Fort Lauderdale in comparison to the citations that are given out if you're white and biking. It's a disproportionate amount. And that also then carries over, I feel, sometimes into the state attorney's office, because then they are like, well, this is a case. I can make this little case. And it's just like, you know, like when you watch some of these body worn cameras and stuff, like you just know that this just went way out of proportion. And I get that you can make a case, but what's really right? Like, this is just a cop that blew it out of the proportion. Like, you really want to go take this case to trial. You really want to jail him for whatever time he can possibly be jailed. Like, it doesn't, I don't think that's real justice, just because you can have a case, especially if it's something minor. I don't know. I feel like there's more, but that's what I could think of right now.
Yeah, I'll jump in for that one, because she's a defense attorney. I was a prosecutor from 2013 to 2016. Not in Florida, but actually in New York. I was a prosecutor in the Bronx. So from the other side, I think I was lucky enough to be in a prosecutor's office that was kind of on the outs with the general prosecution system. And it probably had something to do with the fact that our DA was Black. It just had to be that way. He approached, you know, a criminal prosecution differently, much more defense friendly, because his mindset was, you know, this is not a matter of winning by surprise, trial by ambush. The system is meant to be fair, you know, and having been a prosecutor and seeing the system, I can tell you it's broken. It's a system that, you know, it's disproportionately arrests Black and brown individuals, substantially more than, white Americans. It's just the reality of the situation. And then in that same system, those Black and brown individuals are prosecuted harder in that they have harsher sentences. They are not offered favorable plea deals compared to Black and brown people. And during my time there, I kind of, being able to relate to some of these individuals, would try to tailor my approach, in a manner like Uzma said, that would achieve justice. Just because I can punish you for up to a year in jail or 5 years in jail or whatever it may be, doesn't mean I should. And that's where a lot of prosecutorial discretion comes in. I was lucky in my office that I had some, and I was able to, think out of the box and work with defense attorneys and tailor plans that were appropriate to a particular defendant, as opposed to a blank slate. This is our policy. Everybody gets 5 years. It's not really, you can't do a one size fits all thing, which unfortunately happens a lot with prosecutors around the country. It's just like, oh, we're bound. It's an office policy. I remember one time, because we did have some office policies as well. So they kind of butted heads with our own discretion. And I remember somebody asked for something in court and I responded, I can't do it. It's an office policy. And the judge responded, you went to law school, you have a brain, you have independent judgment. You don't need any of that. If you're just parroting office policy, you can have a computer do your job. And it kind of got to me. And in the moment, I'm like, you know what? I'm bucking the system and I'm going to give this person, what they were asking for in spite of office policy. Nobody ever found out. I closed the case out. But yeah, I kind of went in with a mindset, oh, maybe I can change the system from within. Good intentions, no doubt, but this isn't something that one person can fix from the inside. It has to be, I don't even think it's a matter of comprehensive reform. It's destroy the entire system and start again, because it's so punitive towards, Black and brown individuals versus, because look at it this way. Sure, I can treat my white defendants and my Black defendants the same way when it comes to offers and sentence and all of that. That's my piece of the system, yes. But jump back before that. The white guy would have never gotten stopped by the officers, but the Black guy did. So I can't do anything to fix that portion. I could only do my little portion. And then getting into sentencing, sometimes the judges have their own biases. So, it's so systemic and there are so many different areas that need reform that, eventually you come to the realization that there's not much I can do here except for my limited caseload. It's tough.
And I completely agree. And it's not just with criminal justice system, because like being a public defender, I deal with indigent clients. My clients don't have a lot to their name and they need help. They need substance abuse. They need mental health. A lot of my clients did not graduate high school. They did not have their GED. Some of my clients, they went from juvie court to adult court and have spent from like the age of 15 to 40 in and out of prison, because whenever they come out, they don't have the support to then better their lives. And this started when they were 14 because their socioeconomic status is so low. And then something happens, like a sister gets raped and then the brother is going through emotional turmoil and he has no guidance. He drops out of school, self-medicates, gets involved with drugs, steals to support his habits, and it's an endless cycle.
Mm-hmm. And I hate to interrupt, just one last point that you reminded me of. Mm-hmm. The system, it self-perpetuates as well, because like she said, a lot of the clients are indigent. Who are those indigent clients? They're Black and brown people.
Yeah.
They can't afford the better attorneys. They can't afford to voluntarily go into, treatment.
Hey, I'm a good attorney.
You're a great attorney.
Better attorney?
No, but they can't afford to drop, a large amount of money on a private attorney who can devote the amount of focus that their particular case needs. They can't devote the amount of money it needs to go, get into treatment. A lot of people would come to me, oh, I've already got I self-enrolled into drug treatment without the court telling me to do so. in the hopes that I would give them a better offer because they, they had that go-getter approach. And it really factors into, if you have money, the system treats you better.
So now that you're on that, thought, so what is the difference between a public defender and the private one? Like, what's the differences?
There's no difference in the sense that they're both attorneys, but you can jump in. You can jump in after. I'll give my 2 cents, and then you're welcome to jump in, counselor. The major difference is caseload. If I'm a private attorney, I have the power to accept or reject clients. I can take the cases I want to take. I can reject the cases I don't. Maybe I have personal bias against a particular type of case. I don't like sex crimes. I don't take them. And because of that, because number one, you're paying me, it most likely means you have additional resources that we can hire investigators, we can hire experts, and I can devote the time your case needs because I'm being paid a significant amount of money for it, compared to a public defender who doesn't have remotely the same amount of resources, probably has triple the caseload, so they can't devote that amount of time, and have clients who simply can't afford to do things that would help their case that private clients might be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, you did a good job. But like, so before I was a public defender, I also did some private work down here in South Florida, and I also practiced in Syracuse. The one aspect that I did not like about the private attorney life is that you worry about your marketing, you worry about where the money's coming from, and you have to, there's like the business aspect of the law. And so sure, you can afford to hire an attorney, but I mean, I work for somebody, so if someone needed extra services or needed depositions to be taken or whatever, those cost things. And then, they have enough to pay the attorney, but then sometimes they don't have enough for the cost to investigate the case. Versus in the public defender's office, they don't have to worry about paying for depositions. Sometimes, our office has investigators on staff. So I send them out like, hey, go to this Dunkin' Donuts. Let me know what's, investigate here, take some photos or whatever it is. So I have that at my disposal. I also have an entire office of support internally. I forget how many attorneys we have. I think we're about 100, but like experienced, non-experienced, I could go next door or whatever. Like, hey, I have this situation. This is where I'm stuck. Like, let's talk about it. So there's always somebody around that I have support to figure out my cases. Private side, you either have to find your mentors or, your own support system. So as the criminal defense attorney, I see those types of differences. And any other additional costs for experts and stuff, like I just have to ask my office. I have to give my justifications to it. And if they approve it, great. So in some ways, in the cost aspect of a case, it works in favor of the client. But yeah, my caseload is really high. And I devote a lot of time to my job. I'll get there sometimes like 6:30 in the morning, and I'm not leaving till 6:30 at night. That includes going to court. I'm constantly feeling like I'm always behind. I can't catch up because there's just finish one case and there's another, finish one case and another. And I really try to give it my full heart for every case, because for me, it's a file. But on the other side, that client, that's their life, because I'll file the case away once it's closed. Whatever happens, however it ends, whether it's trial or plea, probation, jail, the client has to live with that. So at least for me, I try to keep that in mind for every single case, that they get my full heart into the case as much as I possibly can do. And I think that I get that from being my Pakistani Muslim background. that hard work ethic and high quality performance. And
so like with you two both being lawyers, like how does that flow back into your personal life? Like how does that impact it?
I think we're in a much better place than we were before. Yeah, I'll take this one. So when I was a prosecutor and she was a defense attorney, like it came to a point where we couldn't discuss cases because we both have strong personalities, strong opinions, and we view things very, very differently. So she'll tell me a story and I'll just like cut her off halfway. Doesn't matter. He's done, he's guilty. Like, and she would get mad. And then, you know, I
visited a client in the hospital on a Saturday and he told me, why are you visiting that scumbag in the hospital?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I will wholly admit this. It's tough. I mean, at least from the prosecutor side, it's tough in the sense that the system is designed to be, you know, innocent before proven guilty. But if you give me a file on my desk and the guy has 35 prior criminal contacts and he's alleged to have done the same thing he did 35 times before, in my mind, he's guilty. So and you have to remind yourself, look at your role in the system. Your role is to prove this, not to prejudge this. So, and, you know, it's very easy to look at people as not people, just, you know, as files, as pieces of paper. That's just this case number. That's not a person. It's harder to keep in perspective that, you know, this is not only a person, this is somebody's son, this is somebody's brother, and give that person humanity. I remember I was watching my friend's first trial. He won the trial, but the guy was like 19 years old and got convicted of like, I don't know, 8 or 9 years for a robbery. And, you know, and the verdict is announced, and I'm lucky my friend, you know, I would say he's a good person. There was no celebration. There was no, we won the case, congratulations. It was just more somber because it's just, you hear the guilt, you see the guy's head slump, you hear his mom crying in the background, and you know, it's the reality that this is people's lives. But, you know, jumping back to you know, what you had asked, you know, we have very strong opinions, and sometimes it's oil and water, and we just clash. And I came to the point where it's like, you know what, let's not talk about this anymore. Let's not talk about cases at home. It changed, I think, once I stopped being a prosecutor and kind of gave me a step back. I think we still can butt heads every now and then, but my time there gives me perspective that she doesn't have. So it's sometimes when she tells me about a case, I'm like thinking what the other side would be thinking. I can point out, did you do that? Did you check this? Did you look at that?
It's very helpful.
And it gives a different perspective. But I think because I don't have skin in the game anymore, it's not as much of a conflict as it used to be.
Okay.
And now that I kind of, immigration essentially is criminal defense, it's just a different type of defense because they are breaking immigration laws generally. So I think I can empathize with her in a way, and you know, I think it helps us communicate better.
But I also remember when we were in New York, I had reminded you that you have one role in the courtroom. I have another role in the courtroom, and I'm doing my job.
Yeah.
Like, because sometimes when we butt heads, like it could become personal. And that's the problem that I had. I'm like, why are you attacking me? I'm doing my job. My job is to defend them. I don't care if I'm going to lose the motion. Do you think it's a good motion that I have a good faith basis to argue? That's all I need to know. Because it's not my job, neither it's his job to make a judgment of guilty or not guilty. That's either a judge or a jury. That's not our role. So is there a state's case? Can the defense poke holes and raise reasonable doubt? And I think it took us a little bit to get there.
To separate the person from the job. Because sometimes you, like you said, you know, 12-hour days, you work so much, you know, and the downside of doing criminal law is you see things you can't unsee.
No.
And you carry it with you even when you're not thinking about it. So I remember I was in New York. It was probably my second or third year at the office. I was having a conversation with my mom. And she's like, "You've changed." I'm like, "What?" And this is over the phone. And she's like, I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Your tone is so much more colder than it used to be." Because you end up compartmentalizing a lot of stuff. Like I mean, I'll recount one terrible instance. I was at work, and very long story short, a mother had a psychotic episode and threw her infant out the window because she thought it was possessed by the devil. The child died, and that was just hard to hear. Fast forward about 2 weeks, and I hear people talking about a mother throwing an infant out a window, and I'm like, yeah, that was a terrible thing. And they go, no, it happened again. This time it was somebody who gave birth and didn't want the kid, threw the kid out the window. And I almost quit right there. Like, I was just like I'm done. Everybody's evil. The world is going to hell. Like, it's really hard sometimes. And I think that plays into when you get into these personal arguments, because I don't see her defending it. I see that person potentially getting out. And it's, it's hard. I mean, I'll tell you this, the job of a defense attorney is much harder than the prosecutor, because at least the prosecutor, you can tell yourself, this is a terrible thing, but my job, I'm trying to do good. I'm trying to, put this person behind bars. And her job is not, I'm trying to, get this person off. It's, I'm trying to do, provide constitutional guarantees that this person is entitled to. And I have to separate my own personal feelings about this person from, it's a million times harder than what I had to do.
Yes.
Because, it's, I'll give you a perfect example. I worked for a criminal defense attorney my first year of law school. And he asks me to write a memo about this guy's wife getting excluded from jury selection for like an hour. So it's my first assignment. I write the memo. I write my heart out. I give it to him. He's like, this is really good. Did I ever tell you what the case was about? I said, no. He goes, the guy is accused of raping a 76-year-old woman. And my face just changed. He goes, that's why I didn't tell you, because subconsciously you would not have worked as hard on it as you did knowing. And I realized this is not for me. I can't make that separation like she can. So it's a million times harder than what I did.
And I see the world with many shades of gray. Like, his personality as it is very black and white. It's either this or that. Versus my personality is, life is full of colors. And I think that suits why he became a prosecutor at one point, and why I'm a criminal defense attorney. And so, it how we view the law is kind of like how we also like have our personal arguments. He's like, it's this and that. And I'm like, no, but this, and there's a little bit of this, and it could be A and B. And so, I mean, that's what I have to do as a defense attorney too. If I'm going to raise reasonable doubt in order to poke holes in the prosecutor's case, I can't just see what's just on the paper. But yeah, it is hard for me at points to separate what I personally feel about the case, or even that person, because not every one of my clients are nice people. Like, they will yell at me and they'll curse me out, and it gets they take out their stress, anxiety, and frustration all on me. Whether I did something right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm at fault.
So what are some things that you do to separate from bringing stuff, back to your home? What do you guys do?
So for me, like I said, I remind myself that I'm not the judge or jury to decide innocent or guilt. And the other thing is that, and I get asked a lot, like, how could you be a criminal defense attorney? Like, you let people out of jail. And I'm like, well, I have a moral compass that tells me that, whatever happens in life, there's a reason for it. And like, at the end of the day, God's going to take care of them. Karma's going to get them back. So, I mean, if I always go back to the O.J. Simpson case, I'm sorry, that guy killed those people. Okay. And then, like, what happened to his life afterwards? It went down the freaking drain. So, like, he got off, he's not locked up in jail, but for the rest of his life. But at the same time, the life that he was living was not that great. Like, I feel like karma got, got the payback. But like, on a day-to-day basis, like, what do I do, like, to separate? Like, my drive home, kind of like that physical space of leaving the office and driving home kind of like mentally transfers my mind into like a different setting. I have to sometimes actively be like, okay, can't sit here and dwell too much about my work, can't complain too much. He's not going to like it. I need to enjoy time with my husband. I need to enjoy like my life. And it's a struggle to have that work-life balance in my mind, and also, you know, on my schedule, like throughout the day, you know, but I'm working on that.
So do you guys, you know, do you guys like schedule like time for Netflix or time to go out to eat, or the music that you guys listen to, you know, stuff like that, you know, like things that can help you, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm like, hey, we haven't gone on a date in a while. Like, let's go. And like, you know, if it's that Thursday, then I plan my work schedule to make sure I do whatever I need to do at work, and to make sure like I make it home in time for that dinner date. I also go to the gym. I also involved in my mosque, which I call Jamaat Khana. So having a life outside of the office helps.
I bet.
Yeah.
And what are some of those things that you like to do? Like, just describe them. You know, let's make it a little more happier. You know?
I think that was the three main things.
Simple things like, because I have my own practice, I have unbelievable amounts of freedom. I set my own schedule. So you know, if she has a hard day, I can cook before she comes home. So there's you know, there's something about having a meal ready when you come home. It just relaxes you, and food she likes to eat anyway.
What a good husband.
Huh?
What a good husband.
He is.
Thank you. But little things like walking, like we'll just walk around the block, talk about our day. We just sit and get it all out, and then come back home into like a house of like peace. Like you said, Netflix, like sometimes it's just disconnecting and watching a movie or TV show can just, you know, take you someplace else.
Currently watching the Harry Potter series.
Although she's weird
classics.
She likes like all this Law and Order shows, and I'm like,
what? So do I. I love SVU.
SVU and organized crime now. Oh my god,
no, it's good.
I get it, but if you're trying to disconnect from criminal law, like when I was a prosecutor, I never watched those things because it's just like I'm watching work on TV and it's bad because it's like inaccurate. So I started watching, and I'm like, I can't watch any of these shows, and she's just like marathon and watching like.
Because I don't watch law. I love the drama aspect of it, and I love it's crime drama. Like I've watched NCIS, CSI, Law and Order, Blacklist, what else? Like Mentalist. Like, and I get into the characters. So like, and honestly, when I'm watching these shows, like I just zone out. Like I'm in the TV world, and then that's it. So it doesn't.
So what are some of the things that are, you know, that are wrong in those shows compared to what you see at work?
Witness sequestration. I hate it. That's the one thing about Law and Order that I freaking like. It irks me.
The law part. I'll jump in. So you've got the law and you've got the order. You've got the cops and you've got the attorneys. The law part, for the most part, tends to get it right. Sometimes you say like, hey, you might not have gotten a warrant. You didn't have enough evidence for that warrant, or you should have Mirandized him, or, you know, that statement can't come in. Little things, but important things. The order side's really where it gets wrong, where it's like, I'm going to like take a bunch of bullets and dump it in front of the floor to make a statement to the jury. And it's like, no, it's never would be allowed. No. People touching the jury box or getting right next to the jurors, and like that's never happens.
The line of questioning, the types of questions that they sometimes ask, and then they just say withdrawn, and they're like, I'm, you know, sit right back down. Like, no, we don't. You don't. The dramatics of the courtroom don't always happen.
There's a lot of dramatization that happens in the order side, and it's like, I'm gonna hold you in contempt. I'm like, I've never even seen anybody almost get held in contempt. Like, but it's like it happens on a daily basis in Law and Order. But so because of me, I'm like, that's wrong. I start picking out those things, and I can't watch these shows. Now I can't because I don't care anymore. But
I don't.
Now I'm curious.
Honestly, the witness part. It's just the witness part. If you have not testified, you do not sit in that courtroom watching other people's testimony. You wait outside, and then after you testify, then you can enjoy the rest of the trial. So
so from your experience, like what has been the most accurate portrayal of law and entertainment, I guess, at least that you noticed? Or is there any at all?
I mean, they usually get like the charge and like the way you got to prove the case and like the elements parts of it.
Like, is there a specific show or movie that does it really well?
I have not seen Suits yet, so I don't know about them.
But what I can tell you, and this is just because it's the typical law school answer, my cousin Vinny is used in law school classes because it's a lot of effective points of cross-examination and just, you know, the courtroom experience overall. It's a comedy, yeah, but there's a lot of points that are super legally accurate that they used it repeatedly during law school for me to kind of like illustrate certain points. This is how you do it. This is how you don't do it. So that's when it always comes to mind when somebody asks, which is a good one.
I've never been asked that. I've never thought about that.
Oh, things to think about these later on. And so now I'm curious about, like, since you guys are like married and you guys have spent a lot of time working, like, do you have any plans for the future? Like, what are the plans for the future to, like, maybe like family stuff, or how do you decide if you're ready or not, since you're always working a lot?
I always think that if you want something in life, you got to make time for it, whether it's growing a family, whether it's spending time with the family that we have. So like he has his sister. So we live with my parents, right? And then his mom, his younger sister, and like her 3 kids are in Miami. Plus I have aunts and uncles here too. So if you want to have that relationship with them, you have to take out time for them. And so I would imagine that whatever the future holds for us, like you're just going to make time for it.
Gotcha.
That's what you want.
Yeah. And part of the reason why in the back of my mind for making the move of going, you know, becoming a solo practitioner instead of working for someone else is I have the flexibility. I don't want to be at work, you know, under someone else's dime. You know, you can't leave because you have this important thing. It's like, no, but I want to go to my kid's game type of thing. So being my boss, my own boss, I have the flexibility. Well, I can just walk away whenever I want. I can do this, you know, within reason, but it provides me a level of flexibility that I know that should we, you know, take that step, I'll be able to be there as opposed to just being at work all the time. And it's more important.
So, and now that you mentioned that, you know, you guys live with Uzma's parents, like, how's that cultural aspect, you know, like what's the, like, what do you, is there anything that are like,
well, let's rewind.
Like, oh, okay, go ahead.
Let's rewind just to the beginning. My parents did not accept him at first. It took them a while to accept him. A long while.
Like, what was that? What was it that, you know, made him not accept? Gotcha.
That's one thing.
So I'm Shia Ismaili Muslim. My parents, growing up, they would say, "Hey, you can marry anyone you want." They did not tell me the fine print of
as long as he's a Shia Ismaili Muslim.
Yeah, they didn't give me that part. And you know, I grew up in Miami. Like, we have different cultures and religions all around. My parents taught me to see people as people and to be kind to them and respect them as people. Like, you know, people are different and that's perfectly fine. So, okay. I mean, you can't control who you love at times. Like, I fell in love with him and that was that. So the fact that, like, you know, we've been here for a little over 2 years. The fact that, like, we went from a point where my parents, you know, didn't want to talk to him, and it was hard for them to accept the fact that he was part of my life, and liking him, tolerating the idea. Then we went to liking him. We finally got married, and now that we like live together with them, it's like a huge accomplishment. Like, I honestly reflect on this every now and then. I'm just like, wow, like X amount of years ago, like I did not even think this would be possible. But now that we're here, it's been an adjustment, because one, they have to see me, their daughter, as a married person. You know, I have 2 sisters, an older one and a younger one, but they don't live in the state of Florida. So my parents, they're both married, but it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. But my mom has this personality, like, you're my daughter. I'm going to give you advice and I'm going to tell you what to do. And my way is the right way. And this is how you could better your life to the day that one of us is no longer here.
Yeah.
And
I think that's the same situation for almost any parent. Even my mom is the same way too.
So it gets really frustrating because I'm like, oh, I'm an adult, like I'm married now. And for me, the other part of growing up, my mom always said, well, one day you're going to get married. You could deal with that with your husband and his family. If they allow it, then you could do it. Like simple things like wearing a tank top or wearing a bikini. She's like, as long as you live with us under our roof type comments, you're not going to do this. But if your husband and his family have no problem, then that's fine, because it's this aspect of I'm property.
And that boils into it. Culturally, it's you're not our daughter anymore. You're part of that family, and that kind of role has kind of been turned on its head because we're here now. So because we're here, she's not really following it. And for me, it's funny. I find the entire thing hilarious. And initially I didn't. In the beginning, it was tough because, I came into the relationship very open-minded. I'm not as close to my family as she is to her. So I kind of never cared what they thought. I was to do whatever I wanted to do anyway. But I didn't realize that just because I'm, open-minded and I'm willing to make the move, that she could do the same. Because, there's, the parental obligations, cultural obligations, societal obligations, whether they're self-imposed or not, you have these, I can't do this your way, I have to do it my way. So it's gone from, her dad in the beginning never even speaking to me to now her mom saying that I'm her son and she's the daughter-in-law. So that the relationship has flipped. But it's funny because, I cook. I know how to cook. I clean things up. And her mom's like, you should be doing those things to her, not me. And it's just like, culturally, she's supposed to be serving me type of thing. And it's like, I grew up with, I'm the middle child between two sisters, and I was raised by my mom. So I've been surrounded by women and have been self-sufficient for a very long time. And like, her mom will be like, oh, did George eat? It's like, I don't know.
And George is sitting right there, but there.
If I'm not there, go find out if he ate. I'm worried if he ate. It's like, he's made it 36 years. Like, he's not going to die. Like, if he's hungry, he'll figure something out. And her mom can't understand that.
No.
I mean, sometimes it's how mothers, show their love. Have you eaten yet? Is a sign of love. Sometimes,
Okay.
That's how I rationalize my mom always asking me, have you eaten it? Have you eaten it? Have you eaten it? It's like a sign of love. So George, like what have you done to make them more comfortable with you as a husband?
Let's see. So I guess being me in the sense that I'm very go with the flow, open-minded. Like, I'm not afraid to try new things. Like
except
when she was like, except vegetables, yes. So, very early on in the relationship, she had told me, if this goes, we felt it was going somewhere, even at the beginning, let's just have the talk now, my children will have to be raised in my faith type of thing. And I'm kind of like, okay. And, having that, or, I started learning, they're Pakistani, they speak Urdu. So I bought some Urdu CDs to learn some common phrases and things in Urdu, just so, I can, be a bit more understanding of the cultural norms. I went to Pakistan with her and visited, family and friends and seen where they've come from. And, I've been fortunate enough to have been invited to their mosque on a couple of occasions to, maybe having a celebration or watching a film, and I'll show up and kind of, trying to, in my mind, it's more, I'm trying to learn more about your culture, but I'm trying to show also that I'm not taking your daughter away from her culture. And I think that went a long way in terms of them realizing, this isn't some outsider who's going to take my daughter away type of thing. I think opening, I can't even speak English, let's try this again. I think living with them has really opened up their eyes to see, how I am. Like, I'm a Christian, they're Muslim. They usually will, pray in the evening. And, when they go to pray, I will go into another room and I'll pray myself, or sometimes I'm the one that's reminding them, hey, it's dua, it's time for prayers. Okay, and then we do our thing type of, or I'll drop them off at mosque or pick them up type of thing. Mm-hmm. So, I just try to be very open-minded, willing to learn. Her mom and I frequently will have conversations. Have you ever heard of this story? And then I'll realize it's the same as a biblical story I know, but the names are, in Arabic. I'm like, oh, that's the story of Job, for example. So there's we're finding the time found in because ultimately, and this is something that I've had to educate, my family, because my mom's side, they're fine. They don't care. They're very much whatever makes you happy.
Open, progressive.
Yeah. My dad's side is much more conservative Christian. Oh, you're marrying a Muslim, what does that mean? I'm like, it means I'm marrying a Muslim. We had to have a conversation with someone to explain to them Allah is just Arabic for God. And, under the monotheistic religions, it's the same God. We're on the same road. We just took different exits. That's how I kind of break it down to them.
Yeah.
And a lot of them don't realize that. So for them, it's more, I have to forcibly educate as opposed to here where it's her mom's like, I'm going to show you. And because I have a very open mind, I just go with the flow and accept it. And I think that's really built what we have.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. And so how's your Urdu now? How's it going?
So I haven't used the CDs in a while. So my vocabulary hasn't grown much, but my ear has gotten much better living with them. The problem is they tend to speak 2 or 3 different languages and they interchangeably, but when they're speaking pure Urdu, because I know certain words, I can pick out the context of what they're saying. And because they speak so fast, I'm hearing it more frequently. My ear is more tuned to it. So her mom might say an entire sentence and I'll pick up the word safai. Oh, that means to clean. So maybe it's something related to cleaning. Maybe a cleaning is coming, or maybe they want us to clean. And I kind of go from there. Or I know common words. So her dad's in a wheelchair. So when I have to I put it behind them, I'm like, sit down. I'll say it in Urdu. I won't say it in English. And sometimes it carries over to when I spend time with my nieces and nephews. The word for yes is G. In Spanish, it's C. So I'll say G, not and they're like, what? And I'm like,
I have to correct him. I'm like, wrong house.
G. But sometimes I'm not even thinking about it, and I'm thinking in my limited Urdu for G. I always say that. So yeah.
I think he covered it really well. I mean,
That's
there's
cool.
been certain events where he has, before we got married, showed up and helped my parents and helped, my family, and took care of me and my family as if it's his own, and I think that really went a long way, because from my family perspective of, okay, he's non-Muslim, sure, okay, I'm gonna be taken away. I'm never gonna go back to Jamaat Khana. I'm gonna forget my prayers. I'm gonna forget my religion, my culture, that aspect. And then if I have a kid in the future, well, then they're not gonna practice, and they're gonna be lost and confused in the world as to who they are, and then they're gonna go astray. But a part of it's also his personality is not good. He's not a good person. Without even getting to know him, they had this
preconception, right?
Stigma.
Yeah, your relationship's not going to work because Hispanics tend to cheat on their wives. Stereotypes like that would come into play. And I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah. It's he's how can you marry him? Hispanics always party on Friday. They drink, and then they go out with other women. And I'm just like, you don't know him, so stop judging him. And stuff like that. I had to break down the racism of I guess is the right word, racism, stigma from my family, of what they perceived as Hispanics, and being a Hispanic man. And over time because you were fixing my brakes.
Yeah.
And this is before we got married, and my uncle had come over and he was like to me, like, what is he doing out there? And I'm like, fixing my brakes. And he ended up having conversations with my dad. And my dad was like, yeah, man, like he's saving me like, oh, thousands, like at least $1,000, maybe 1,500, because he knows how to fix the brakes and everything. And that same uncle, in that day, he was like, oh, that's good. And that's the same uncle that came at me with the whole like Hispanics cheat and you're gonna get divorced comments. I could see like his mind kind of like change. And then that was in June. By the time we got married in December, he wasn't fully all the way there of acceptance, but it had changed even more because he had done things for my family. And now he's just like, oh wow, you live with my brother, you take care of them, you know. And for the most part, I think everyone is good. I mean, I still get, I don't know if you know this, but I still get the
here we go.
The hesitation of what's going to happen if I have a kid. Because a lot of people can say, yeah, sure, you're going to raise your kid as Smiley. I have no problem with it. But I guess until it really happens and like, you know, pen to paper type of deal, like, they're still not going to believe it until they see it.
I'll see it till I believe it. Yeah.
I totally understand those fears too, because, you know, I kind of agreed to it without really thinking about it like too deeply, like I feel this, because at the time I'd agreed to it. Sure, I've always, you know, designated myself to be a Christian, but there are ebbs and flows to your you know, your faith, and I wasn't particularly, I wouldn't say you know, practicing that much at the time I made the promise. But now I'm more, you know, more in tune with it. So it's like, should I be bound to it? And then, you know, we've tried to compromise where it's like, oh, how about the kid is raised Muslim but goes to, you know, a Christian school so they can learn both aspects of the faith. And, you know, I kind of came to the realization that I don't want to confuse the kid. You know, you're getting, you know, sure, there are similarities, no doubt, but there are also stark differences. And I don't want to make the kid, you know, sitting in a mosque just being confused. So, you know, I kind of came to the realization of, let's just raise him 100% in your faith. I'm not going to hide my faith. I'm still going to, you know, go to my church. I'm still going to pray on my own. And if my kids ask me questions about it, I'm going to answer them.
And he came on this to his own. I had no influence on this.
Well, you know, that's good. That's great.
If, you know, if the kids are 18 and ultimately decide they want to try something else, I'm happy to, you know, deal with it at that time. But until they're 18, they're going to be raised in her faith, and you know, regardless of what they're raised in, I think they provide, you know, a good baseline for like a moral compass and stability.
Yeah.
The main advantage, the real reason I don't have an issue with the children being raised in her faith is that, you know, in Catholic and Christian church, there used to be a Catholic, now I'm a non-denominational Christian. You know, in those churches, it's really you go and you leave, especially in the Catholic church. The Christian church, depending on which church it is, you might have like, you know, youth groups and have better relationships with people, but it's not, I guess I would say, it's not like a village mentality. Her mosque is very much a village mentality. Like everybody here is your aunt and uncle. Everybody here has an interest in your life. And it's a meshing of the religious and cultural, you know, in one location where, you know, everybody's an aunt and uncle. They know your dad for 30, 40 years. They, you know, take a real interest in you. They praise you when you do well. If something, you win an award at school, 70 people will come up to you. Congratulations, yada, yada, yada. And I think it's great for a child, you know, it their self-esteem and lets them know they're not really alone. They have a place where they can, you know, I've never gone to church and like felt that way.
It has its negative sides on it, but
yeah, I mean,
it has a lot of positives.
Everything has its own positives and negatives. But if I have to pick one for the child to be raised, then I'd rather have them something where they're raised essentially in a community of love, and a community, and her particular community has a lot of you know, emphasis on, you know, public service, doing for others, My kid could go to that for 20 years and decide I don't want to follow it anymore, but they will have been raised on a foundation of serving others, a foundation of sacrifice, but also a foundation of family.
Yeah.
It was, of course, I would love my child to be raised under my faith, but I made a decision nearly 10 years ago, and I'm standing by it, and it is what it is.
It's probably the right move.
Yeah, I mean, for me, if I'm carrying the kid and I'm going to mosque for hopefully what's going to be a full term of 9 months, then I feel like that kid has a connection with me, and then by extension to my community. And I believe in, call it soul, spiritual vibes, energy, whatever you want to call it. Like, they're already going to have some built of a connection. So for me, that's important. Plus, you don't go out to the American society and you don't know what Shia Smiling Muslim is. Like, you don't know, but I, from school, from my friends, from television, have an idea of what Christianity is or Catholicism is, because it's all around me. So it's also important, and the only way you can know what being a Shia Smiling Muslim is being in that community. Being a part of it, going to prayers, the religious education classes. That's the only way you're really going to know. And I can't teach that outside of that setting. And so, yeah, I want them to be exposed to that. And it's such a huge part of who I am. It's a huge part of what raised me and made me who I am today, that I would want my kid to be part of it. And that was a huge thing for me, that whoever I married, I needed them to agree that my kid, or our kid, was going to be a Ismaili Muslim. That was something I was looking for. And when he told me yes, I was like, yes.
So
check mark,
So I have a final question, right? Like, what are some advices I can give to other people, other couples who have this intercultural relationships that you can share with them?
I'll start.
Okay.
Be patient is the number one thing. If I didn't have the struggles with her, we probably would have been married 2 or 3 years before we actually were.
Yeah.
But some things don't go that easy. I'm lucky enough that I had I really think in the beginning it was not that they didn't like me as a person, but they were just so hung up over culture and tradition and this fear that I was going to take their daughter away, that kind of took over, rational thought. And it was just kind of we're not changing our mind, we're not budging. But that patience, and in hand with patience, it's being open-minded. I think, showing them that, I wasn't going anywhere, that this wasn't some, little fling that was going to end, by showing them I was willing to learn about their culture and their experiences and who they were, from the religious aspect, from the cultural aspect, and the individual aspect. I think that's ultimately what led them to, warm up and lower their guards and ultimately accept. It's a lot of patience, because it's not going to, I didn't really get, we're intercultural, and, you can call it interracial, we're interreligious, interfaith. I didn't really have much of the, interracial stigma that some others may have. I know if you went back to my great grandparents and you told them, hey, he's going to marry a Black girl, they would lose it, because, there was a lot of racism at that time. I'm lucky enough that I didn't really have to, my family didn't really even question the interracial component. It was my dad's side more with the interfaith component. But even then, like I mentioned before, I kind of do my own thing. But
now they love me.
But that was, they love her more than me.
I talk to them.
More than I do. But yeah, it's really being patient. It's not going to come easy. Nothing good comes easy. You've got to put work, you've got to put time and, investment into that. But I think ultimately the combination of being patient and being open-minded can get you very far.
I would say being confident. So I dated a non-Ismaili Muslim during college, And my parents knew about that relationship, and they would be like, oh, do you want to marry him? Do you want to marry him? And I'll be like, oh, you know, we'll see. And in this relationship, when I told them, I felt like I was more confident. First, I knew who I was, more at this point in my life, meeting him in my life versus the college version of me. And I knew I mean, it sounds weird, but like I had certain checks that I needed in life, include, like I said, like, you know, agreeing that our kids are going to be of my faith. But I wanted somebody who met certain qualities that can like embrace my family, that can not pull me away from being me. So I looked for that type of personality, and I found it in him. And then I displayed that confidence to my father. Like telling my mom was like relatively easy compared to telling my dad. Like at one point, like I told my mom told my dad. And at one point I knew that he knew. And then he knew that I knew that he, like, it was like one of those things like over time. And then eventually like, we're like,
But
we never spoke about it until like, you know, months later.
It's not real if you don't talk about it.
And then like, and I had told him, because he's like, well, how are you going to be when you're, you know, talk to your parents about it. Like, how's that going to be? I'm like, how are you going to know? And I'm like, I will know when I talk to my dad and how confident I am in that moment. And when my dad and I spoke for the first time about it, I felt super confident. And I think a lot of this comes from knowing yourself and being, you know, self-aware, as to what you want and who you are, and like who your partner is, and what they bring to your life, because you want to highlight that to your family. Like, this is not these Hispanic stigmas that you've been raised with. Like, yes, he's Hispanic, but he's a different type of person. Like, his heart is good. He does these things for me. He does that things for me. I mean, I guess in a way it's kind of like knowing your audience, what will appease to them, and you kind of like build your case and argument towards that. Hey, it worked. Okay.
No,
and
it works.
We did our research too, because my parents were saying that our faith is against this, like, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I know I might not know everything about our faith. And my mom is.
Oh, I went on one of their websites and found like this old, basically, I guess you could call it a sermon from like the 60s, and it was like, oh, this is allowed, and I forwarded it to her, and then she used it in a discussion with them. Oh, this is backed by religious doctrine. But yeah, it was, I think that was a combination of showing like, hey, I'm looking at your stuff and it's supported by this, you know, and it kind of, you know, it helped lower their guard. And kind of what she was saying, like, it harkens back to being patient, because even when her father accepted, okay, this is going to happen, then it was being patient because he had to tell his family.
Oh, yeah.
He said, okay, we've got to wait because he has to tell his family, and then they have to kind of have their hash it out.
That was 8 months.
Yeah.
That was 8 months.
Wow.
Just waiting.
Waiting until he opened his mouth to his brothers and sisters about it. And then once my dad's side of the family knew, then my mom would tell her side of the family, because my dad's side of the family is more like the stricter, conservative side. Man, I was gonna say something else and I forgot. But okay, so like, you know, I feel like we've talked about everything like he's done, you know, to make himself available to like my family and stuff, because my family was the harder one to like win over. But at the same time, like, I constantly remind myself like, oh, I need to be attuned to like his culture and his needs. So like at our wedding, the flowers that I had, I wanted to be like tropical. I wanted to bring out the vibrance of like tropical island life of Puerto Rico. I tried to get the national flower, but it wasn't in season. So I was
but she, you know, she reached up to my mom. She asked about wedding tradition. She tried to make the effort to incorporate as much of, you know, my culture, because I mean, I see myself more as American because I was born and raised here. You know, my dad wanted me to speak English without an accent, because he didn't want me to have the same stigmas he did. So I think in doing so, I lost some of my culture. But like the music, the food, the decor, she was trying to incorporate all of that into show that this wasn't just a Puerto Rican marrying a Pakistani. This was a blending of cultures.
Yeah.
Going from the music, going from the food, going from
the favors.
the wedding favors, everything that we tried to do was just a blending of our cultures.
And I feel like that's what I've always tried in our relationship. And Christmas, once we got married, I started doing Noche Buena dinner. Our like, hey, it's Easter coming. You want to go to mass? Like, are we going to church? What are we doing? And that also extends to like his family too. So if I know it's like Easter coming up, or one of his aunts is Jewish, so I'm like, oh yeah, we need to message her. And like, I have to initiate a lot of that. And I put it that because I find it important that if he's doing so much for me and my family, I owe it to them, and I owe it to him. So I know it's a lot of words to be like what to give to tell other couples, but I think like
it's a two-way street.
It's a two-way street.
Really
There's effort. But I think this works because we know what we want, and we radiate that outwards, and we're a team, and we try to display that in all aspects. And I could only
except the law.
Okay, give you that. Okay. And then I can only hope that like when we have a kid, if we're blessed to have a kid, it's going to be a blend of both cultures, blend of both faiths, teaching of tolerance and patience and service, some hard work and effort put into this relationship and then into the kid. So if you want keywords as to what to do, I think that kind of sums it up.
That's great. I mean, I hope to also follow your advices and into my own intercultural relationship as well too. So I think it's amazing what you guys are doing. So I definitely thank you guys for joining me in this little talk and sharing your story.
No problem.
No problem at all.
All right. Do you have anything you want to share for your law, your own practice or anything?
Sure. We'll throw a little commercial there. So I am an immigration attorney. If anybody has any immigration needs, you're welcome to check my website out. It's gomezlawfirm.org. Be happy to chat with you, free consultation, discuss your immigration needs.
Great. I will definitely include your links into our social media content and then on the links below.
Sounds good.
Great.
Thanks,
all right,
Norm.
guys.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
See you later.
Bye-bye.